Hello and welcome to the Sense Making in a Changing World podcast. I'm Morag. In this episode, I'm delighted to be speaking with Jasmine Dale, permaculture author, designer, and educator, as part of our special Permaculture Writers series. This podcast is an initiative of the Permaculture Education Institute. We teach the Permaculture Design Certificate course, Permaculture Teacher Certificate, and permaculture business skills online to people on 6 continents, who in turn then localize and enrich it and find appropriate ways to apply the planet care ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share wherever they are. In this episode, Jasmine shares a wonderful story about how she discovered permaculture, about how doing a permaculture design course transformed her life. She shares insights about being part of the founding group of Lammas, an off-grid eco-village in Wales, where she cut her teeth as a permaculture educator, and this is where, with her husband, she built the famous Hobbit house. She talks about her way of teaching, designing and applying permaculture thinking, and right now she mentors community groups with a focus on nature connection and basic skills for resilience. Throughout our conversation, Jasmine shares such wonderful tips about writing, and what you'll find in her book too, the Permaculture Design Companion, which is a step-by-step guide to applying permaculture in your own life. Her observation is that there is also a great need for more books that cultivate greater levels of eco-literacy, earth psychology, and big picture thinking. Permaculture, she says, has also been something that keeps her sane and grounded, and is something that she feels she can offer to help others deepen their connection with nature and for kindness to the planet. I'm recording this episode from my hand-built, solar-powered studio here on beautiful Gubbi Gubbi country, surrounded by my permaculture-designed gardens. I acknowledge that this is and always will be Aboriginal land and pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Before we jump in, I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to Sense Making the Changing World, either on the YouTube channel or on any of your favourite podcast apps. And leave us a lovely 5-star review and comment. It really does help the bots to find our show. And remember to check the show notes below for all the links. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did. Well, welcome, dear listeners, to the Sense Making in a Changing World show. This is one of our Permaculture Writers series episodes, and I'm delighted to welcome today Jasmine Dale, all the way from Wales. And she has written an amazing book called the Permaculture Design Companion, a practical workbook for integrating people and places. And I had a bit of a look through it because I haven't actually got this book on my shelves. And as I looked through some of the little snapshots that I could see, I thought, oh my gosh, I need to get this one and share it far and wide. So I'm really excited to explore this with you. But before we dive into your book, maybe a really good place to begin would be just to let us know a little bit about how you ended up finding your way into permaculture, because not only are you a permaculture writer, you're a permaculture educator, and you live a permaculture life in a really deeply intense way. So how did you come to discover permaculture and then weave it so much into your life?
Well, I was doing a degree in politics, and it was largely focusing on food poverty, land use, and the international trade and all that stuff. It was very heavy. It was very theoretical. And so in that process, I became, I suppose, a green person. But I think in my early 20s, I was quite a bit of a pain to my friends because I was, overwhelmed by the problems. And I did used to subscribe to a magazine, and there had been something about, I think, Lot 83 at Crystal Waters, who was an older guy who, there was just an article about him, and it kind of stuck in my mind, but I didn't really understand what permaculture was. But a vivid enough picture was painted of that place and of his work. And so then, the year after uni, I went to see my cousins and best friend in Tasmania, and ended up in the call centre in Telstra, which, as anyone might appreciate, you do 12-hour days ringing hundreds of people a day, and it's pretty stressful. And I think it's worth sharing this anecdote. So, you get these calls come up automatically, and up popped Crystal Waters, and I'd forgotten about it. And there was just an answer machine, and it just had the sound of like bullfrogs or something, or I don't know, not frogs, and insects and birds in the background. And the stark difference of sitting there in this tower in Melbourne, I got acne from the stress of the cooling and everything. And so I just finished that job and I hacked off up to Queensland, to Mullaney. And when I got there, they didn't want any volunteers. And this young man, who I believe was Max Lindegger's son, he just said, well, there's a PDC just started yesterday. Why don't you go? And I looked at the money I'd earned at Telstra, and it was my whole amount, or what I managed to save. And so I went on that course, and pretty much within a 12 hours, I probably was blown away, because I'd never learned through play or creative methods before. Apart from that, there was just the whole environment was amazing for me. And yeah, so that being presented with solutions, it kind of dissolved that 4 years of negativity around the intractable situation of global and local, economic and environmental problems. It kind of just mitigated it instantly. And yeah, and so then within a few years, I'd started picking up more training on that, and I decided to move to the countryside. And I had also seen lime plastered buildings at Crystal Waters, and quite shortly then me and my husband got really into lime building and roundwood building, and lived off grid for many years. So that was sort of how I was in it. And as soon as I'd got access to fields, first as a volunteer living on a project, and then later in my own place, I although on the course at Crystal Waters we'd been taught it through in play, and I didn't have like these analytical processes to follow, but I knew about them, and I quickly started applying that quite diligently, really, partly because it felt like such a big responsibility to have bare land to repair, that I've always thought that permaculture was useful for people like myself who are a bit too timid to impose our views on land. I felt like it's ideal because it stewards you through sensitive approach to the other species and patterns that are happening on that land. But then I also think it's good for people that are gung-ho and maybe a bit too confident, because it holds them back. So it's a great process, I think, for using in quite a step-by-step way.
I really like the way you've just described that, because it is so useful for both of those ends of the spectrum, as you say, and everyone else in between. That's a really lovely way of explaining it. So maybe we could move. I know you're one of the founders or the co-founders of Lamas Eco Village. You want to just maybe tell us a little bit about that place and how you landed there, and what it is like living in a kind of a permaculture, off-grid, one planet eco village. What does that all mean?
Yes, it's well, there were so many people living what they might call low impact lifestyles in West Wales that basically a policy was made to kind of formalise that, to sort of stop it happening, I suppose, erratically. And we were living at someone else's place as full-time volunteers, and I happened to get a small inheritance that was enough to buy fields. So up came this project, and it had a certain requirement on it to live a land-based lifestyle, to have like a enterprise, I suppose. And I in no way was in the mood for retail, and I hadn't ever, but I did want to live in the countryside, and I really would like to have my own holding. So that was the motivation, and because nearly every other family had children of the same age, so there was a 4-year process of getting planning. And I would say we didn't use the permaculture process really to design the plots or anything. I think I was the only person there that had done a PDC out of the 17 adults. There was a loose understanding amongst other people, and so we went at it quite formally, and we had all sorts of I'll do it the way they say, the good, the bad, the good. So there was this amazing opportunity, 70 acres, which is quite a lot out here, denuded, overgrazed land, and everybody had their 7 acres. And so we did set 2, and it was an amazing thing at the beginning. Every single one of us had been massively craving to have that connection with soil and to get orchards in and everything else. So there was that. On the downside, if your listeners or us can picture, if you move onto fields without, this is also permaculture stuff, without road access, without toilets, and without electric, and most people living in caravans, and having children, and having to still work, and pretty much apart from 3 families, the other 6 hadn't ever done off-grid living. So you might imagine that although it was amazing, there was an incredible pressure on us. And we also didn't really know to what extent we might come under quite a punitive system, because we had a planning permission things to uphold. So I suppose therein lay the shadow of the stress and the overwork. And I remember years later, Rabina from New Zealand, I think she's quite famous, and Robin Clayfield and some others came through, and they showed a lovely slideshow of all these places all over the world, permaculture holdings, and they all had these very beautiful shrines, and sort of there was a lot of care had been put into making ornamented places. And I felt a real sadness for us at Lammas, because we'd just worked like dogs, really. There was only really 1 or 2 people who were very committed to beauty that had managed to provide that sort of spaces. So there was a lot of hard grind as well as being very beautiful. And sadly, in a way, we had huge governance problems. Our original documents were rubbish, and that combined with stressors, I think, led to quite entrenched conflicts for a while, and that resulted in some court cases and things. So I think all that, as far as I understand, has all been clarified now. There's still a little bit, I think it's still a little bit beset by difficulties, but there was also, it's grown its own culture. There's excellent people, obtained permission all around. And, what did happen there really clearly, and this is partly to do with the people, but partly to do with nature's forces itself, is the biodiversity is amazing. Everybody, however skilled or not, cared so much about their places, and even if they're arguing with neighbours, they cared about their places, and everyone made ponds, planted trees, a lot of attention to accommodating wild plants as well as bringing in plants. So within quite a short few years, and it really showed me how quickly land can repair, from totally bare with just a few hedgerow, hardly any mature trees. I think within 3 years you could notice a big difference. 5 years, it was pretty obvious. All the microclimates were there. And one of the great things about doing lots of things by hand and not having many resources is people didn't have the money, say, to make massive changes, or with, say, like machinery or something, or we did use machines to terrace, but that you can't manage and impose your will on those many acres if you're busy. And so there's a huge lovely areas of wild corridors everywhere, and it sustains an immense amount of bird life, and because it's little patches, it's a mosaic, it's highly diverse. So
I really feel your the challenges that you're talking about, but also the beauty in that natural regeneration. I mean, as you know, I live here at Crystal Waters, and it's the good, the bad, the good as well, and it's kind of part and parcel of being in a place. I've been living here for 25 years now. But so where are you now then? What positive lessons did you take from that experience and take with you into your new place where you've landed?
Yeah, well, I've landed quite nearby, but it's we've had for 2 years now. We're in an area where it's at the same elevation, but it's like rough grassland with lots of standing stones and big rocky outcrops. It's very low farming, as in not intensive. It's a low input farming around me, and national park, and it's very, very old. So we were always building new build houses on fields that had never been lived on, marginal places. Whereas where I am now is where there's been a house for hundreds of years. And so that probably means there was someone here for, forever, really, because that's the way they plant houses in these ancient places. And so there's one of the, I suppose, the key lessons that has stayed with me was the observation phase. So at Lammas, we had 3-4 years in the planning process. So I made an extensive design, then there was a hell of a pressure to get it on the ground and get producing. Whereas here, I'm older now. I now work outside rather than working from my plot. And so I just haven't, for this first year or so, I haven't felt any impulse to put anything down, really. It's a bit like, I think, well, part of me could think that it's actually says, look, I've been like this for a long time. Don't just come in here and put your newfangled ideas down. So I did actually this week order my first fruit trees. So that's after being here for 2 years. It's not really a good microclimate for anything like that, but as you could appreciate as a permaculturalist, we've got to have some fruit trees, haven't we? And I did put in a lot of wildlife and timber trees last winter, actually, in somewhere where I felt so. So I think that sort of sector analysis, if you like, the wind, sun, water view, that sits in me. Although I've gone away from the analytical more and more, especially if I'm teaching, then I still those ideas are really deeply imprinted in me. So I strangely haven't been bothered to do a proper base map or anything, and but I wonder about that. Maybe that was because I have been thinking about it like this for since 1999 roughly. I've been thinking about these tools. Maybe they're in me. And so, I've used sectors I have planted a small veg garden. I'm going to put these fruit trees in, and in me is very deeply, where's the wind coming from? Where's the most sheltered spots, and where's the ground?
Really interesting what you're saying, because it's, once you get it into your elbows and your knees, it's like you're saying, it's in you. You just naturally tend to think and plan and map things out in a that's kind of when you get to that point, I suppose, of that's a mastery of a topic, isn't it? When it just is there and it becomes sort of obviously seen how things go together. You don't have to work it as much. It just kind of is. Like, you would obviously be going through all those processes, but just in a more, it's like riding a bike, it just is. It's how you see it.
I've tended to use the word fluency. I haven't got to, I wouldn't like to say for myself mastery exactly, but
nice.
Yes, especially when I used to teach the design process as a sort of certified or workshops and things, sort of courses, because it can seem a bit sort of contrived and analytical to people to go these step by step, but that's always what I felt for me the benefit had been, especially doing the diploma, which was quite tedious, but I felt that the benefit of that was that you kind of got a fluency in it. Well, there's a great young farmer called Matt he's probably not that young, Swarbrick, up in North Wales, who I went to the Wales Permaculture Gathering there in September. He's running a brilliant regenerative farm, a couple of market gardens, the whole thing. And he said that, when you walk past something 1,000 times, you don't really need to do the steps anymore. So there was that thought. But I think I probably picked this idea up from Bill Mollison type more books, is that, in our genetics, in our ancient selves, we had to be, we did, didn't we? Like, we read landscape and materials. They were like, we were so connected with them that we knew. So I always think that we can't have lost that completely just in 2 generations. There's all, oh, woe, aren't we terrible humans and everything. But I feel like it's just is dormant in us. And although we wouldn't advise new people just to go into somewhere and start rampaging the soil or something, but surely we must have some innate understanding of soils and shelter and plants. We must do.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that, and I love the word fluency. I think that's a really lovely way to describe it. How did you become a permaculture teacher? What was your path, and how do you like to teach? What's your way of teaching? What do you teach?
I suppose on that Crystal Waters PDC, I did have a little bit of a like, oh, maybe I might enjoy to do something like this. Then it was completely parked. Then I back a long time ago, 2005-ish. I was teaching something we have out here called Forest School, which is a sort of self-esteem building thing. It's got quite a specific method to it, and I got my leader certificate in that. And I just noticed instantly that play-led learning, as it lent very well to sort of. So I was weaving permaculture in that, in the games and in the things we did with the children, without obviously mentioning the word, and devising little games where we were using our bodies to represent the layers of woodland edge, because forest gardening out here, we've got so little light compared to you that our productive area is the woodland edge. So so I was devising games, and I mean that creative teaching method of Robin Clayfield and Sky, I suppose, that really had stuck in me. And so then when I got to Lammas, I suppose as a volunteer at other projects, I'd started to have to give the odd led session of some type. But a brilliant woman called Jodie Tellum came along, and she was already used to teaching intro courses. And so we just devised one. And the first one we ever did, we put so much into it, we thought out every single tiny bit, used every single permaculture tool to do it. And I just felt like, this is something I really feel I can offer, and where I feel like I'm really thriving. And well, after a while, Jodie went, but because I had the small holding, we did tours nearly every other week, and we'd get a lot of visiting groups from all sorts of people, artists, architects, anybody, all sorts of people. And so, well, within a couple of years, I was really fluent at doing that. And it went very well, but I couldn't really get people to come for permaculture courses. But my husband was quite a well-known natural builder of straw bale roundhouses, and so people would come for that. So that's really where it went. I did all my talks and things, like I'd do this, show them the plot, the sectors and the layers and everything, and had all that wonderful resources there to kind of really bring it to life, and develop my own style of delivery, I suppose, trying to use the body wherever possible as a sensor, to complement the analytical side of everything. But it ended up really being where we'd, because everyone wanted a hobbit house, they called it, which was what my husband had become well known for making, but they weren't really thinking about the landform or it connecting in. It's to do with this dream people have. It really awakens something in them. And so I was like, what the problem is the solution? Well, they don't want to come for me or my skills, but they will come for him. And that is, he didn't want to be a teacher. So I thought, there's the gap, isn't it? They want the house, but they haven't thought about where to place it, or any of the surrounding systems like food or firewood, water, that make a house usable and sustainable. So that's how I based it. I did the formal sessions in the morning with the design tools and the observation and everything, and then they'd go and build for the afternoon and do something with lots of straw and mud. And in West Wales, we've got, there's the Lammas project itself, but there's also a huge array of really interesting other sites to visit, communities and organic farms. So we had a wealth of places to do great visits. And that's something I'd learned at the course at yours, as well as other courses, was that, you really got to have the diversity and mix it up with all sorts of experiences to help people really learn on multiple levels.
Do you still teach permaculture now?
Not strictly. Occasionally someone will say, can you come and do a day or weekend? So if they organise everything and it's already set up,
turn up and teach. That's nice.
It gets tiring, doesn't it?
Did your book come out of the teaching, or did you see, how did the book, where did that fit into your flow?
So the book is basically the sum total of everything I learned up to that point, 2017, from other teachers and from the more than 1,000 people that came through my hands, and from working on that piece of land. And the chapters are in effect the sessions we would run. So they're like a bit of an idea, like a half a page, followed by some body thinking exercises that you do on your own place. And so yes, that it is very much, with a few other things chucked in, it's very much was the basis. And I'd come to a point where I didn't want to teach that course anymore, or those type of topics, but I didn't want to lose that harvest. It felt it'd been very rich, and although I was like increasingly like not kind of enthusiastic, I knew that there was something good in there. And so I don't know, do you know The Morning Pages, The Artist's Way? No, The Artist's Way is a brilliant book, but it has you do these things called morning pages, where first thing in the morning you write 3 pages of A4 of whatever's on your mind, and it's partly a way to get out all the crud that's in you, to allow your creativity to come through. But sometimes you get really clear crystal bell ideas come through. And a few years before writing the book, that had started to come through. Like, why don't you just write up at least the sector? Because I'd had developed some really cool exercises for that, and I thought they were really they were the great interface between analysis, design, and observation. You know, they brought all those together. And so I had this idea to write a pamphlet, and also because it'd get boring, people would buy land and they'd ask me to come and do it. And so I always want people to do it. They've got to do it themselves, haven't they? Really, I've never really been one for being a consultant. So but then I did a big survey of what was out there in the existing permaculture books, because there's no point writing something that's already out there. And I thought, okay, like The Artist's Way, it's a practical workbook. It's a self-led, directed sort of process. And so I thought, so I drew on quite a lot of things like that in my survey process. And so I mapped it out, and I could see it felt like, I don't know if you as a writer, you get this, sometimes you get a feeling where there's quite a massive energy behind it, and you just know it's going to come out and come out clearly. So I did start that at the same time I finished teaching certified courses in October 17. But then on January the 1st, 2018, a couple of days before, I'd written a chapter on wild sector and fire sector. Writing about fire sector, I'd said, like in Australia or Portugal, you need to take care of this in your design. We don't really have wildfires here. And I wrote more about the sun sector and under fire and how that would. And then I wrote the next chapter was just a 1-page on wildness and the unexpected, and how that can come and change a design completely, or how do you accommodate uncertainty in the wild when you're doing such a controlled process as designing something. And strangely, my house burnt down in one day, in like a few hours, and that happened just the day after I think I wrote that chapter. And so something that had been being built for 6 years went in a couple of hours, and a month or two, because there's obviously some sort of trauma involved, month or two afterwards, my husband just said, come on, pick up that book. So it was just what I did for that year afterwards. That's why I wrote it all up, because I didn't want to lose everything. It seemed like a great container for.
Oh gosh,
I don't know if that answers the question. Sorry, it was a bit long there. So then it's out there, isn't it? I don't really mind what happens to it, but I think teachers and diploma students find it really useful. The book, that is.
Yeah, I think it sounds to me like a book that would be so helpful for everyone starting to actually work out how to teach design as well, like whether you're actually doing your own design, but also working out how to teach design. So that's kind of what I do a lot of, is teaching permaculture teachers. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot now is asking for support for more activities, or how to actually share this. And it sounds to me like that would be something that would be perfect. So I'm going to be sharing that out with everyone from now. So thank you for articulating that so beautifully. I wonder whether there's any other tips in terms of writing that you would have for people who are thinking about starting to write, or any other kind of gaps when you were doing your survey of what's out there in the permaculture world, of what other gaps you might have seen in the permaculture writing sphere?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, because I do buy the occasional book still, but well, I feel that at the moment there's maybe a bit of a call for. I've just picked up a wonderful book called Emergent, which is about more how ecosystem works. And I feel like in this reductionism that's going on about carbon and carbon dioxide, which everyone are two very different things, but people seem to conflate the same word. I think that might be something quite useful, because you're getting I'm now a mentor for community groups, and they're mostly people that has just become a new idea to them about being green. And there is, I think compared to any time in my life, I'm nearly 50, is that people are actually turning their attention towards being green. Now, I don't have that much faith that I could suddenly turn them onto permaculture suddenly, but there's this great love of nature and the preciousness coming through. But there is a skills deficit and an understanding deficit, I feel, of ecosystems. I don't know. That's just what I seem to feel. So, like the obsession with planting trees, when there's lots of data to show that well-managed grasslands and shrubs sequester as much carbon dioxide, if not much more. Or I was with someone and they were seeing a willow tree. See, in the cool temperate climate, all our plants have evolved to be coppiced, and to be grazed and eaten and cut continuously. And so someone I was with who actually had a science PhD was looking at a willow tree. It was all straggly and overgrown. And they just said how sad it was that people might come and cut that tree down. And I just thought, I feel sad, really, that it's this lack of understanding, because that tree's roots will pump down and do much more if it's regularly grazed or coppiced or something, and it will provide more bird habitat. So I think there could be a place for bringing people into nature stewardship, combining that with self-awareness and self-care. There could be scope there just to help people understand natural processes a bit more, because they're not really getting that through the mainstream information, I don't think. Although yes, that's one thing. I also noticed that there's this book called Earth Path by Starhawk. I don't know if you know it. It's probably quite old now, but pretty much guaranteed every year in my courses someone would borrow it and never bring it back. I think it was the most borrowed, least bought back book. So I bought it like 6 or 7 times now. So I think there's something in that. So that's probably influenced my book quite a lot, in that she combines this analytical with the self-observation. So, you go into a field and you think, oh God, I don't like this, but you park those thoughts away. You don't really acknowledge them. They're marginalized, but there's information in there, because your own body and mind is having a response. And it might not even be about the physical environment. It could be, about anything, the people element, whatever. So that could be, because I noticed, that could be something that really yokes together our own inner workings with this observation outside, and then the practical solutions. There could be scope for that. In fact, someone called it earth psychology to me.
Yeah, fantastic. I love those 2 ideas. It's just really wonderful. And I really think there's so much scope to, even just coming from a permaculture perspective of thinking about books, like really trying to expand the field of where we go with it, and finding those edges of intersecting between, eco-psychology and design, and how we can bring those things together. I think that would be amazing. And also thinking about how to apply different scales as well, for example, bringing it down to something that, children could really access a whole lot, or even, maybe some more materials for youth. I'm hosting a whole series of forums coming up soon, and we're really looking at sort of, well, what's permaculture when you're thinking about active retirement? What's permaculture when you're thinking about homeschooling? What's permaculture when you're thinking about mental health? What's permaculture? And so really going permaculture and where can we go when we start to expand the field in that? So I really feel like there's a lot of possibility of bringing together different fields of knowledge, forest schooling and permaculture. What does that look like together as this beautiful piece that can be shared out?
There's I've got a question for you in a sec, but there is quite a few people, I think, who are quite active like that in Britain. I don't know, maybe I've got a friend, she's 78 or something, she's doing her diploma, and so her designs have been a lot about how to transition to not being able to physically do things. I think there's a quite a big body of work for children in permaculture. The name's called Lucy, but I don't know. But anyway, that's the people would find some stuff like that. But I was interested to think for you, like, so if I do workshops now, or like yesterday, I was with some wonderful people, and I was bringing in permaculture ideas, but I never mentioned that word. So what? It seems a shame, doesn't it, to lose the legacy and the coherency of all that first principle stuff and the massive movement of that goes on in its modern form. So what do you think about this dilemma of bringing in the word or not bringing in the word?
Oh, I always do. I always do. And I'd question it too, like what you're saying. And there was this woman, she must be 70 odd. Her name's Rhonda Hetzel, and she's written this book called Down to Earth. She's a really, I was interviewing her at a local food festival, and she just released a new book, and I was talking to her about that, and I was just amazed. I'd not expected her. She said, all of a sudden, she said, "Oh, and I blog, and I have 20 million followers," and I think I almost fell off my chair. It's like, gosh, all these people are interested. And so she said, "Come over, and I'll teach you how to blog and do all these things." And so I did, and I went and sat with her for a long time, and we talked to her, and I said, "Look, I don't know. I've always done permaculture, but I don't know whether I should call it permaculture or not, whether it would, limit what I'm doing." And she just said, "No, Morag, you are so already involved in it. Fill it, infuse it with all that you are as well, and, bring new ideas into permaculture, expand the field of permaculture, redescribe it through your language. Every person who comes into permaculture will redescribe it in their language." And I really have tried to do that and to make it more gentle and open and accessible and welcoming. And particularly as we're teaching permaculture here too, it's sort of saying, what is all that you bring to permaculture, and you apply a permaculture lens, and who is it that you want to be working with? Who would you like to teach? Like, it's not like a fixed thing or a cookie cutter approach that we do this and it has to be that way. It's like it's a kind of a way of seeing. And if we do it, so it can be, a permaculture way of doing something, and I just find it a really gentle way of bringing the kind of the concepts in, because as you start to introduce a tiny bit, you can sort of then open doors gradually to multiple dimensions of what it is, and it kind of creates this connective thread. And what it does too is it brings forward that body of knowledge, and it also helps to create this global language of connectivity between people who are doing it all around the world. And I think too, what gives me a lot of confidence as well is when I see, people in the refugee settlements in Uganda saying permaculture is making a difference in our lives that, is actually saving lives here. And when you sort of step out of your own kind of comfort zone and imagine the possibilities of what that actually means there, that there is this system of knowledge that can be handed accessibly through this democratic education process to communities like that, and it makes a difference, then, I really embrace it so wholeheartedly.
Okay, well, that's going to give me food for thought then, because you probably know what it's like when you're trying to you probably got your own ways of giving it the one sentence explanation for different types of people, because that little first mention of it. And I suppose quite a few years ago now, you'd meet people that go, "Oh, I don't want to hear about it, it's composting or something," so I developed various quick ways in, and if it's a certain type of person, I might say, well, it's a design system that's modeled on ecosystems. Or another type of people, I might say, well, it's a way of harnessing, human needs or whatever. So sometimes if it's a new audience who wouldn't have heard the words, then I will try sometimes. But no, now you've said that, maybe I'll give it a bit more effort, because they can't really access the further and wonderful world of it, can they, if they don't know the word? So.
No, that's right. And as soon as you sort of drop that in, it can just start to open up a whole world of knowledge that exists out there, and a connectivity. And what I think too, I've through this podcast series that I've been doing now for a number of years, I've been talking to people from all different backgrounds. Some people who are not directly in the kind of permaculture world, and I start to talk with them, and it's people like, say, Fritjof Capra, and he will say permaculture is the way of applying this systems thinking. Like, it makes sense. You hear people like Vandana Shiva saying, and permaculture is, like a big part of the solution. So I've looked to different people from different backgrounds and tried to see, and people like Helena Norberg Hodge and all different people who I highly respected for many years, who actually now sort of understand what permaculture is a bit more and go, oh, actually, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And I'm delighted to hear that, because I was inspired by them when I was in my early 20s, and it was because of the kind of things that they said about what's happening in the world, what we need to be thinking about, what we need to be doing, that kind of drew me to permaculture as a way to respond. Like, okay, here I understand all these big pictures, but what do we do in our own communities? How do we apply that and then share it and myceliate it out into the world, like in a way that makes sense, as something that's tangible, accessible, shareable. And I've yet to find anything that is more than that I am able to kind of offer as a bundle, And there's a lot of different independent bits and pieces, but something I can go, okay, well, here it is, and it's got permeable edges. Don't kind of see that as like that's it, but it's kind of like something I can grasp hold of and offer as a way that people in their everyday lives, anywhere where they are in the world, can actually grasp and do something with. And that's why I think, actually doing what you did in terms of writing down your process is such a valuable thing. And I would really love, more permaculture writers in the world, which is why I started this series, saying, well, what is your experience? How have you done that? And how can we inspire more people who've kind of developed up a body of knowledge within this to be able to get out and share it out into the world as well? I think that would be so wonderful, that we share our stories. We're so busy doing our stuff that we don't actually share what this thing permaculture is all about, really, from all these different angles. I think the diversity of perspectives and ways that it manifests in people's lives is really, really important. And not to say that not to be dogmatic or fundamentalist about it at all. Like, I just see it as a field of knowledge and a connective thread of concepts that helps people to kind of grasp what it is that we're talking about. It's more a paradigm or a way of seeing or something.
Yeah, I think a lens is, I've used that term too that you said there, and it's a pattern language in a way, isn't it? That's why it's so applicable to any context. So there's been good movement in Britain to apply it beyond land. A lot, there's been quite a few teachers and people who have really pushed that one forward. Yes, in social projects. So I think it's really healthy the way it grows. I mean, I love that early works of Bill and David and all that stuff. I think they're amazing. I just, lucky enough to got my hand on a manual, but it's they're hundreds of pounds in Britain now.
Really?
Hard to get them. Yeah, but someone died and somehow I got past their copy. But yes, but it also grows really organically and in filling niches, isn't it? It's like an ecosystem process itself. A niche appears, like you might know the work of Luby, and she's taken it into this idea called cultural emergence, and that's very popular, and it's really taken the people side of it up. So there's that. I was thinking about the process of writing, although for that particular book I very much wanted to lay out the design process. We call it often using SADAMET: survey, analysis, design, implement, maintain, evaluate and tweak. That's partly just as an adamancy to help people who kept finding permaculture confusing to see that side of it. And there's a section on principles and stuff. But what I was thinking might be nice to just share with the readers, the listeners, is if I'm starting a fresh piece of writing, which will now be more like something like an article or a report for someone, I like to sit fairly still, and then maybe this wouldn't work for everyone, but I then pick I go to what we would call the shamanic bookcase, and I think this is an idea from Edouard de Bono or someone else, that you just go and you, without thinking, and you hold the topic that you'd like to write about, and then let it go, and then go to the bookcase, put your hand in, pull out anything, and the first thing you open it on, you see how that links, like in a holographic way, because as Carl Jung, he's one of the first people to really describe that everything is linked in some way, like in psychology anyway, the first one. So yeah, so I do that. So I might be thinking, oh, I've got to write this thing about peer mentoring. Yeah, that's so I had to write peer mentoring handbook recently. But I know that for writing to be good, it has to have a catchy thing, doesn't it? We're not in the 1800s anymore where you can do a long, slow novel. You need to have something that draws people in instantly. So I might go and open the bookcase, and then it might say anything, and it might be that will be, I'll make a link, and that will be my opening gambit. So for me, especially because lots of people get writer's block, and sometimes you have to do the body of writing first, don't you, and go back and make the intro. That's quite common as well, because it takes a while to settle, to know really what that powerful opening sentence will be that really draws people in. But it's a bit like being a magician or spelling, isn't it? Spell casting. We do need something with some quite sparkle to it to get someone to actually bother to sit down and read. And yeah, I have this one called Walking on Alligators, which is something the Artist's Way recommended, and it says a book of meditations for writers, and it's like, I don't know, hundreds of 1-point ideas. So I'll quite often use that, you know. Say if I said I'm going to write to Morag today, I'd open it up and it says, in nearly all important transactions of life, we have to take a leap in the dark and blah blah blah. And so then it has that, and it says, today I will set aside my doubts and simply write. So there's a much longer thing there, but so that's, I find that, I don't think it's ever failed me for getting
What's
going.
What's it called again? Alligators?
Yeah, Walking on Alligators.
Walking on Alligators. Oh yeah, there we are.
Yeah.
Cool.
By Susan Shaughnessy.
Very good. Yeah, I think those sorts of things, and I love the idea of just grabbing something random and then, you know, doing the moire effect and bringing those things together. I think that's fantastic. I often too, there's a couple of ways I seem to find starts is I'll sort of map out all my ideas even before like I start writing the text, and then I'll just see it there as this big kind of soup of ideas, and then go for a walk and just kind of then something I know just, and they'll just land, you know. It's just like pump, it's like a oof in my belly, and I think, right, that's the starting point. Sometimes that works, other times I'll go off and do it's probably similar to the bookshelf. I'll go off and listen to a seminar about something else, or join in a conversation, you know, with a group of friends talking about something else, and then just some little thing of that, or, you know, raise the topic and see what happens in the conversation, where the energy of the conversation is. And
that's good. They're good ones. Going for a walk or something, I have had it recommended. Again, it was Artist's Way of any right-brained activity, like make a big soup or do something. And it just creates that space for the thing to bubble up.
Nice. Yeah, metaphorically and physically as well. Yeah, gosh. Well, so if you're not teaching permaculture now, how do you, just as a final kind of thing, how do you see permaculture in your life, or in having informed where you are now? Do you still feel it's like bubbling away there? Because obviously it's been a big part of the journey to where you've landed now.
Yeah, well, I still I'm workshop leader, I suppose. It's largely been mentoring community groups, mainly to do with being green. So I still, if I'm project planning with them, I still basically am using the permaculture design steps. I still bring in the principles, like I say, I might not really mention them explicitly. And yeah, I'm using it all the time to think holistically about what they might need. So yesterday, the people I was with, they were totally new to green ideas, but they were dealing with people that had trauma. So I'm thinking all the time about the people care, earth care, fair shares, those three ethics and how they were always, it's always able to. But I'm going to give a lot of thought now to what you've said about bringing it in more clearly. But I'm always thinking in it. And then on my garden, yeah, I am applying it. Probably more like in that sort of homegrown principle kind of way. That sort of ideas, anything I'm doing here will be backed by permaculture in my mind in the garden. And I'm not so good at this one, but I use it for like the inner landscape survey, that sort of idea. I think I've copied it from other writers, but I do made a resource for the inner landscape. So you say, what's the big trees in my life? What's my microclimates? What's my shelter from the wind, like thoughts? What's my sunny spot? And where am I in transition? Where's the water flows? I used to do that really regularly. Check.
That's beautiful.
How I was.
That's beautiful. Have you? Where is that written up? Like, is someone written up that process?
Yeah. It was in the Permaculture Magazine. They asked me to make something during lockdown about personal resilience, and I wrote it up for them. So that was in about 2020, I suppose.
I'd love to link this chat to that article. If we could link it down below, if I can find it. And
I think you can through them, and they've got all their back copies available. I don't know if you have to be a member or not. I can certainly send you a Word document of it. I think I've copied it from somewhere, like the idea, like maybe Starhawk, because she interprets all the elements.
Yeah.
But never seen it written as that. But I just started it when I wrote my Zone 00 design up for my diploma back in 2010. I just thought, well, we're a landscape, aren't we? And when you're with other people, like you have to do like a training for groups on conflict resolution. Well, it's so boring for me. I don't want to think about that. But what you could do, isn't it? You can address your inner landscape, and perhaps that's the best thing you could do to operate harmoniously in a group is attend to your inner world. So
yeah, that's beautiful. Oh, I'd love to read that piece. If you were able to send it, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I'll happily send you the Word doc, and then but for the magazine they obviously made it look nice. And
I'll contact the magazine as well and see if they've got a link to that page too. So are you still writing articles?
Only just occasionally someone asked me or something. I haven't noticed any big urge to write come through, like when I wanted to write that big book. And I have kept thinking, why aren't I writing plays to connect people in a deep ecological way? But it's not coming through. But now, I like, for the people I work for, I just made a handbook on peer mentoring, and I really enjoyed writing that, and that was good.
Fantastic. That's a great topic to write about. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I was going to ask you too about you started your story saying that you went and studied politics, and do you see what you've been doing through permaculture and how you're living and what you're doing now as a form of political activism in a way that responds to the things you're concerned about?
No, I try to keep away from anything that's considered political or ideological. There's some very complex reasons behind that, but I think it's just been the way to keep me sane. It's I knew I wasn't the person to interact on a policy level, or occasionally maybe I'm contributing to that in a really left field way, but I'm no longer really massively someone that's trying to build the eco dream or something physically, because I've done it for too long and I'm now tired. So I think it's just my personal thing. But where I am activist in a way is when I'm working with all these community groups, I suppose I'm on a mission on some levels to help people thrive. And myself personally, I'm probably like an animist or something, because I really love rocks as much as I love plants. But But I'm not at all interested in going and pushing that on someone else. But anything that helps someone feel better and more confident, more connected, then I feel that the nature connection will come in, and that it's up to people to make their own choices. But yeah, kindness. I think there's a few good people and writers and everything, Buddhists or whomever, have emphasized that perhaps that's the really important thing. And I can be quite mean, so so yeah, I think that's what's motivating me much more than anything political is kindness.
Yeah, kindness. It's the motivating force, I think, that we really do need in the world more than anything else right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So if people are really trying to do a wildlife project, then it's do it for the plants and for the animals and for them, more than because I believe that we must have,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jasmine. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you and learning about your way of applying permaculture in your life and writing your book and your ways of writing too. I hope that those people who are listening to this will be inspired to pick up the pen or find a way to share their story or connect in with what's going on. So thank you so much, Jasmine. It's been just wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you for this spearheading. You seem to be taking it out into the world on many fronts. Thank you.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Sense Making a Changing World with permaculture author and educator Jasmine Dale. Check out the show notes below to find the link to her book and other resources she mentioned. Also check out the notes for where to find details of our permaculture YouTube, blog, free masterclasses and film clubs, our permaculture design course and our permaculture teachers course. Come and join us to learn the practical skills for designing and teaching permaculture, making a good permaculture living while living permaculture-inspired one planet way of life. See you next time.